Hello and welcome to another video. My name is Boxiest, and today we are going to continue the What If series. What if events had gone differently? And in this What If, we're going to change the history of Cobra Kai. What if Kumiko learned Miyagi-Do during the events of the Karate Kid 2? So in this timeline, Mr. Miyagi and Yukie would still fall in love. Sato would find out and he would be mad, so he would want to fight Mr. Miyagi, and those events would stay the same. Mr. Miyagi would still leave Okinawa, and Yukie and Sato would never be married, but Sato would still want to win over Yukie. So by the time Kumiko was born, Sato would offer to train her. He would want to get closer to Yukie through Kumiko, so Sato would start training Kumiko and Chosen from a young age, and the events of the Karate Kid would still happen. Daniel would still meet Mr. Miyagi, and he would still be picked up by Johnny and the Cobra Kais. Those events would carry on. Daniel would still beat Johnny in the 1984 All Valley tournament, and those events would carry on. Mr. Miyagi would still get a letter from Okinawa telling him that his father was sick and he would still want to go. So Daniel and Mr. Miyagi would still go to Okinawa, and when Mr. Miyagi and Daniel arrive, Chosen would still greet them, and Sato would still want to fight Mr. Miyagi, and those events would carry on. Mr. Miyagi would still see Yukie after all those years, and Daniel and Mr. Miyagi would meet Kumiko. Mr. Miyagi would notice that Kumiko was trained in Miyagi-Do, and Daniel would see Kumiko practicing her kata. Kumiko and Daniel would still become friends, and she would show him around Okinawa. Chosen would still want to mess with Daniel, but in this timeline, Kumiko would defend Daniel, and she would want to get Chosen to stop fighting. In this timeline, Kumiko would be more skilled than Chosen, because unlike Chosen, Kumiko didn't take shortcuts to get to where she was. Kumiko would also be a better fighter than Daniel, and she would know the aggressive side of Miyagi-Do. Daniel would be impressed by Kumiko's skills, and Kumiko would explain that even though she was Sato's student, she didn't share the hatred that Sato had for Mr. Miyagi. Kumiko and Daniel would train together, and she would even teach Daniel some new moves. The events of Karate Kid 2 would still happen. Daniel and Kumiko would still fall in love. Chosen would start to get jealous, and he would want to fight Daniel, but Kumiko would fight back, and she would defend Daniel. She would only see Chosen as a friend. The hurricane would still happen in this timeline. Mr. Miyagi and Daniel would still save Sato. Sato would be grateful, and Yuna would still be stuck at the bell, so Daniel and Kumiko would go save her. So in this timeline, Chosen wouldn't be disgraced, and the rivalry between Sato and Mr. Miyagi would end, and the abundance would still happen. But Chosen wouldn't fight Daniel in this timeline. Since Kumiko wasn't a dancer in this timeline, she wouldn't get into her dream school, so she would go back to the US with Mr. Miyagi and Daniel. Kumiko would be excited to know America, and the events of Karate Kid 3 would still happen. Kreese and Terry Silver would still want to get the revenge on Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, so Terry Silver would still hire Mike Barnes in this timeline. Mike Barnes would still want to mess with Daniel, but in this timeline, Kumiko would help Daniel defend himself, but Mike Barnes would still force Daniel to sign up for the All Valley. But much like in the original timeline, Mr. Miyagi wouldn't want to train Daniel, so Kumiko would offer to train with Daniel, and she would teach him everything Sato taught her. Daniel would train in a similar way Chosen and Kumiko were trained, so Daniel wouldn't go to Terry Silver in this timeline. In the night of the All Valley, Daniel would still fight Mike Barnes, and those events would stay the same. Mike Barnes would still intimidate Daniel, but in this timeline, Daniel wouldn't be as afraid of Mike Barnes, and he would see Kumiko cheering him on in the audience. Mike Barnes would still gain and lose a point, but in the end Daniel would still defeat Mike Barnes, so Daniel would be the 1985 All Valley champion. Cobra Kai would shut down. Daniel and Kumiko would continue their training with Mr. Miyagi, and Daniel and Kumiko would stay together over the years, and that is where I'm going to end this What If. Thank you guys for watching. What do you guys think would have happened if Kumiko learned Miyagi-Do during the events of Karate Kid 2? Let me know in the comments below. YouTube lets me know that the majority of you are not subscribed, so if you guys could subscribe, that would be much appreciated. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. And I'll see you guys next time.